Most people do not stay broke because they never learn how to invest. They stay broke because every new dollar arrives in their life without a chain of command. That is the part almost nobody wants to hear. They think wealth is built by finding the hottest stock, the cleverest ETF, the perfect entry point, the next great technology story. That is the entertaining version. The profitable version is uglier. Wealth is mostly built by putting each dollar in the right place in the right order before excitement ever gets a vote. If you get the order wrong, a great investment plan can still lose to a bad leak. A man can be buying index funds every month and still be going backward if a credit card company is eating him alive at 22%. A woman can be researching dividend funds every weekend and still be making a foolish decision if she is ignoring a full employer match. A couple can be proud of their brokerage account while the IRS quietly takes a larger slice than it needed to year after year, simply because they skipped better tax shelters first. That is why I care about sequence. When people ask me what to invest in, they are usually asking the wrong question. The better question is this: what is the highest order use of the next dollar that enters my life? That is how rational capital behaves. Not emotionally, not socially, not by trend, by order. The first mechanism is the leak rule. Before a dollar goes out to earn, it has to stop a dollar from bleeding. This is where most people try to skip the line. They get excited about markets while carrying debt that is compounding against them faster than their portfolio is compounding for them. That is not investing. That is performance theater. If your credit card is charging 22%, you are not in a position to feel clever about an 8% index fund return. The card is beating you brutally. Quietly, mathematically, people want to argue with this because debt payoff is boring and the market feels productive. I understand the emotion. I do not respect the arithmetic behind it. A guaranteed 22% savings from killing high-interest debt is superior to almost any realistic after-tax investment return available to an ordinary person. It is cleaner, it is safer, it is immediate. There is no volatility in it. There is no press release to wait for. There is no analyst upgrade required. The return begins the second the balance dies. So the first order of wealth building is not glory, it is leak control. That is why I say the first job of a new dollar is often not to make money. It is to stop losing money. Most people hate that because it sounds like discipline and not ambition. Good. Most wealth is built by discipline wearing ambition. S-close. The second mechanism is the shock absorber. Before you try to build a compounding machine, you need enough cash to stop life from knocking you off the road every time it sneezes. That is what an emergency reserve really is. It is not just money for broken transmissions and dental bills. It is continuity capital. Continuity matters more than almost any return assumption. If one emergency forces you to sell investments at the wrong time, or throw new debt onto a high-interest card, or stop contributing for 6 months, the damage is bigger than the bill itself. The bill is just the visible wound. The real wound is broken momentum. That is why I do not treat an emergency fund as dead money. I treat it as a strategic firewall. People who have no cash buffer are always one bad week away from becoming short-term thinkers, and short-term thinking is where compounding goes to die. If I were ordering the first dollars of a financial life, I would want that firewall in place quickly. Not because cash is a wonderful investment, because fragility is a terrible one. The third mechanism is the gift gate. This is where human beings reveal how irrational they can be. An employer offers a match on retirement contributions, and people still hesitate as if there is a profound debate to be had. There is not if somebody says, put in $1 and I will immediately add 50 cents or $1, and you walk away from that, you are not being cautious. You are refusing a contractual gift. This is one of the few places in finance where the return is not theoretical. It is immediate. It is visible. It is signed by your employer and sitting in the benefits packet. Most people never read carefully. Now I will say something precise, because precision matters. The match does not mean ignore all debt forever and stuff every available dollar into the plan. It means you grab the match first, because even a dangerous debt balance usually cannot beat a 50% or 100% instant gain. Then you go back to killing the toxic debt. You do not confuse the gift gate with the entire mission. You just make sure you walk through it. This is what I mean by order, not ideology, not all debt first, not all investing first. Sequence, enough to get the gift. Then back to the leak. That is intelligent capital allocation. The fourth mechanism is the tax fortress. This is the part the crowd underestimates, because taxes do not feel dramatic in the moment. They feel small, annual, procedural. That is exactly why they are so dangerous. They are a slow siphon. And slow siphons kill giant fortunes just as effectively as spectacular bad bets. Once the emergency buffer exists, once the ugliest debt is dead, once the employer gift is captured, the next question becomes simple. Where can my dollars hide from unnecessary taxation the longest and the best? That is where retirement accounts stop being boring and start being powerful. People think an ARA or a 401k is just another place to invest. Wrong. It is a different legal and tax environment for the same money that matters a dollar compounding inside a tax. A shelter is not the same as a dollar compounding in the UB, while the government takes a bite every time. Dividends appear or capital gains get realized. The bite looks small early. All compounding damage looks small early. That is what makes it lethal. When you choose the wrong container, you can make fine decisions inside a bad structure and still lose tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to drag over time. That is not a market problem, that is an order problem. And here is where I become even more opinionated. For many people, the IRA deserves attention before loading more into a mediocre employer plan beyond the match. Why control costs, choice? Too many employer plans are stuffed with expensive funds, narrow menus, and mediocre options dressed up as benefits. The IRA often gives you cleaner tools, cheaper tools, and more freedom to act like an owner instead of a captive customer. Again, sequence: take the free match, then pursue the better tax shelter with better weapons, then return to the employer plan when the next best shelter has been filled. That is how smart money moves. The fifth mechanism is the triple shield account. If you qualify for a health savings account and you ignore it, you may be walking past one of the strongest legal tax structures available to an ordinary worker. I like simple advantages. The HSA is not simple because it is small. It is simple because the logic is brutally clean. Deduct going in, compound untaxed while it grows, withdraw tax, free for qualified medical costs, 3 doors all opening in your favor. That is rare. A lot of people misuse this account because they treat it as a checking account with a health label on it. I understand why. Medical bills are real, but if your cash flow is stable enough to pay current medical costs out of pocket and leave the HSA invested, you have turned a boring benefit into a long-duration weapon that matters even more, because retirement is not just an income problem. It is a healthcare problem with birthdays attached to it. You do not need imagination to know that future medical costs are coming. You only need structure to decide whether you will meet them with taxable dollars or one of the most tax-efficient dollars you will ever own. So yes, I rank this account high, not because it is fashionable, because it is unusually powerful. The sixth mechanism is the funnel effect. Once you have captured the match, eliminated the toxic debt, built the reserve, funded the IRA, and used the HSA if available, then you widen the funnel into the larger employer plan again. This is the part where people start feeling like real investors, because the numbers get bigger and the annual limits matter more. But notice what just happened. By the time you are really loading the 401k, you are no longer a scattered financial amateur. You are somebody who has already done the foundations in order. That means the 401k is not competing with a credit card. It is not competing with a missing emergency fund. It is not competing with the employer gift you forgot to take. It is not competing with better tax treatment you skipped. It is finally operating in the environment where it makes sense. That is the whole point of sequence. A good vehicle in the wrong place in line becomes a mediocre decision. A decent vehicle in the right place in line becomes powerful. Now, let us talk about the part everybody wants to start with, the taxable account. This is where the crowd wants to begin because it feels like freedom, unlimited contributions, no employer gatekeepers, no retirement, age rules, no bureaucratic wrappers, stocks, ETFs, crypto options, all the toys. I have no problem with taxable accounts. I have a problem with people arriving there too early and calling it sophistication. If you are buying exciting assets in a taxable account while ignoring the stronger, earlier, more sheltered uses of the same dollar, you are not operating at a high level. You are just skipping the line because the line is boring. Taxable investing should be the late-stage freedom layer, not the early-stage chaos layer. That is the seventh mechanism, I call it, the permission trap. People confuse permission with priority. Just because you are allowed to buy a stock does not mean a stock is the highest order use of the next dollar. Just because you can fund a brokerage account does not mean the brokerage account is where that dollar belongs yet. This is where a lot of people sabotage themselves while feeling advanced. They have the legal permission to speculate. So they mistake that permission for strategy. A proper taxable account becomes incredibly useful later. It gives flexibility. It can fund early retirement bridges. It can fund down payments. It can sit outside retirement age restrictions. It can be passed with favorable treatment in some cases. It can do real work. But it comes after the stronger shelters have already been used properly. That is what intelligent order looks like. And if you want to speculate in taxable space, fine. But do it after the foundations are secured, not instead of them. The eighth mechanism is the false excitement problem. There is a reason so many people get this order wrong. The correct order is not emotionally stimulating. Nobody brags at dinner about fully funding an HSA. Nobody posts a screenshot of paying off a 24% credit card and gets showered with fire emojis. Nobody builds a social media following by saying, I redirected my raise into a broad index fund inside a tax-efficient wrapper. The right order is boring, but boring is often just another word for compounding without interruption. People want wealth to feel like a series of bold decisions. Usually it feels like repeated obedience to a structure that looks too plain to be powerful. That is why very few people stick with it. They want stories. The sequence only offers arithmetic. I like arithmetic. Arithmetic has no ego. Arithmetic does not care what is trending. Arithmetic does not care how you feel about a meme stock. Arithmetic just compounds consequences. That is why the wrong order is so expensive. Not because every step is catastrophic in isolation, because every skipped step weakens the dollar before it ever reaches its best battlefield. Now I want to make one more point because this is where many people still think I am too rigid. They say life is messy, of course it is. They say budgets are imperfect, of course they are. They say not everyone can max every account, of course they cannot. This is not an argument for perfection, it is an argument for hierarchy. You do not need to do everything at once. You need to know what comes before what. If you only have enough to do 3 steps, do the first 3. If you only have enough to grab the match and kill the debt, do that. If you can only partially fund the IRA this year, fund it partially. If your HSA eligibility comes and goes, use it when available. This is not a purity contest. It is a capital command system. The person who knows the right order and advances imperfectly still beats the person who does exciting things in the wrong order for 10 years, by a lot. That's put as wealth is not 10 million, it is built by preventing leakage, capturing gifts, defending against taxes, and only then letting compounding do what compounding does best, slowly then all at once. So if you want the shortest version of the whole philosophy, here it is. First, create enough cash that life stops knocking you off the board. Second, murder the debt that compounds against you faster than assets can compound for you. Third, never walk past free employer money. Fourth, use the best tax shelters before you start performing sophistication in taxable accounts. Fifth, treat health accounts like hidden retirement weapons if you qualify. Sixth, return to the broader employer plan once the stronger earlier buckets are filled. Seventh, use the taxable account as the freedom layer after the foundations are already carrying real weight. And finally, never confuse what is exciting with what is highest order. Those are not the same thing. The smartest investors I know are not the ones constantly talking. They are the ones whose money has been given instructions so clear that very little talking is required. Every dollar that enters their life already knows where it goes next. That is not luck. That is not genius. That is order. And order is what turns income into capital instead of into noise.